Hello folks, how do you like this? Special effects. I went on YouTube and found a tutorial about how to do special effects green screening, so now I'm back at my girlfriend's apartment, but it looks like I'm at my apartment with the wall of books behind me, so hey, now I'll be able to put anything I want behind me. So, to kind of get your mind off all the stuff that's going on, I thought I'd start a whole different sort of project, and I don't know if every video I'll do will be this, but I'll try to do it all the way to the end. I hope that makes sense. My friend Chris Burnham did a video in which he reads the entire Genjo Koan, which is probably Dogen's most famous piece of writing, in the voice of Gilbert Gottfried. And it's great, and I'll put a link below. Watch the whole thing and give him some clicks and likes and thumbs ups and things like that, so, it'll help encourage him and make him feel good, because he's stuck in this too. But what I'd like to do is use that as a jumping off point to do a commentary on Genjo Koan. And I'm going to try to not reference my own previous commentaries, which appear in Don't Be a Jerk and Sit Down and Shut Up and maybe other places. So I'm not even going to look at those, besides which they're not here at this apartment. And I'm going to try to do it fresh. So let's start off by listening to Gilbert Gottfried, or Chris as Gilbert Gottfried, do the first paragraph of Genjo Koan.
As all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, birth and death, and there are Buddhas and sentient beings. As the myriad things are without an abiding self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient being, no birth and death. The Buddha way is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. Thus there are birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings, and Buddhas. Yet, in attachment blossoms fall, and in aversion weeds spread.
Okay, so he's using the Robert Aitken and Kazuaki Tanahashi translation of Genjo Koan, which appears in, I think, Moon in a Dewdrop and maybe several other places, and you can easily find it online if you just Google for it. I'll try to put a link below. Can't promise I'll find it. And it's, I think it's a good enough translation. I think it's a good translation. I shouldn't even say good enough. It's a good translation. I tend to prefer the Nishijima and Cross translation because Gudo Nishijima was my teacher. But we'll go with the Robert Aitken, Kazuaki Tanahashi translation for the sake of this commentary, since they're pretty close. The first paragraph of Genjo Koan would be probably described, or has been, I know for sure because I was there when it happened, would be described by Gudo Nishijima as a statement of what Nishijima Roshi called the four philosophies. And that's subjective, objective, action, and reality. And the little acronym, or whatever you call it, that he created or somebody created for him to remember that is SOAR, S-O-A-R, subjective, objective. And he saw Dogen's writings as constantly making reference to these four philosophies, which are 4 points of view for looking at anything in the whole world or universe or philosophy or anything, and making sense out of them in a kind of a Buddhist way. He also relates these to the Four Noble Truths, and it's quite difficult to kind of make this work with the Four Noble Truths. I think Nishijima Roshi was right, but I also think that the standard way the Four Noble Truths are understood and Nishijima Roshi's understanding of the Four Noble Truths are quite at odds with each other. So the standard Four Noble Truths is all life is suffering, the cause of suffering is desire, to end desire ends suffering, and do the Noble Eightfold Path of ethical action to end desire and therefore cut away suffering. But Nishijima Roshi reinterprets that as the first noble truth is the truth of subjective understanding, like self-centered understanding, where I am the subject and everything else is the object. The second noble truth is the understanding of a kind of an objective point of view, where I don't think of myself as anything particularly special and everything is doing its thing, and that's kind of the basically the materialistic worldview that I think most of us grew up with is what you would call the second version. Action is the third one, and action is where you actually do something. And when you do something, then these ways of looking at things sort of mingle together. You are both a subjective subject working in the world and having your experience, and there are objects outside of you, and that's all interacting together. And then reality is his final one, and that's a poetic summation of all the first three wrapped into one little package, right? So in the case of Genjo Koan, let's look at the lines. The first line is, as all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, birth and death, and there are Buddhas and sentient beings. So if we look at things from the subjective point of view, there you have to say all these things exist. There is life, there is death, there is delusion, there's realization, there are Buddhas, and there are sentient beings. So things are all separate. You can make a distinction between me and you and the computer and whoever, and there are Buddhas and sentient beings. There are Buddhas who are understanding great things, and then there's me who doesn't understand anything about anything. So you can make those distinctions. The second line, as the myriad things are without an abiding self, so we're moving away from that subjective view, that self-centered view. There is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient being, no birth, and no death. So from that objective point of view, you can't really say there's anything, because everything is just whatever it is. So Buddhas and sentient beings, for example, are both animals. You could say that in that kind of materialistic point of view. So Buddha was a kind of a mammal who lived on planet Earth, and Brad Warner is a kind of mammal who lives on planet Earth. And as far as the so-called objective universe is concerned, they're both pretty much the same. They're both just units that eat food and poop and fertilize the world, however the world sees us, that's how things are. So there's one way of looking at things, and then there's another way of looking at things. The third line is, the Buddha way is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. Thus there are birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings and Buddhas. So this is the view of action. So leaping free of the many and the one, I think, is how he puts it. Leaping free of the many and the one, I take to mean a kind of an illustration of action in the present moment. So in the present moment, there are Buddhas and there are sentient beings and there's life and there's death, because that's how we experience things. There's stuff going on, and we can make these distinctions. But these distinctions we have already understood from going to the second point of view in the previous sentence, are also, they're meaningful to us, but they're not meaningful in a bigger sense, maybe. But because the subjective and objective are both equally important, this is one of the things that will come up. You don't say that what's really happening is that everything is meaningless and I just think it has a meaning. Because you think it has a meaning, because you experience it as having a meaning, then it does have a meaning. So these are both true, even though they are at odds with one another. And the fourth sentence in that opening paragraph is, yet in attachment blossoms fall and in aversion weeds spread. I'm not that fond of this translation that Kazuaki Tanahashi and Robert Aitken used. Here's what Gudo Nishijima says. And though it is like this, it is only that flowers while loved fall and weeds while hated flourish. I think that gets it a lot better, because the in delusion weeds flourish and inversion weeds, I don't even remember exactly what it said, even though I read it 30 seconds ago. It's a confusing sentence, and you're kind of going, what the hell in delusion? I don't know what the hell that means. But the version that Mike Cross and Nishijima Roshi came up with, I think, is much more concise and clear. So even though we love them, flowers fall, and even though we hate them, weeds spread. So we can't do much about how things are. I mean, this is probably very true to all of us living through this coronavirus pandemic thing. We can't do a whole lot about how things are, but we can kind of live in the moment when we are living and thereby, in a way, transcend whether we think it's good or whether we think it's bad. And that is the standpoint of doing Zazen, and that's where we hope Zazen can help us get to. So I'm going to stop there because I think this video is already a bit longer than I wanted it to be, and I'll pick up next time. I don't know if I'll do that as my entry for tomorrow's video or not, but I'll continue these and I will label them Gilbert, Gottfried, Genjo, Koan 1 or something like that, so you'll know which is which if you want to watch them all in a series. Thank you very much. I hope you're doing well with all this stuff that's going on. Pray for everybody who's having a hard time in this hard time. And I have to remind you, my Patreon and PayPal links are below, but I'll also remind you again that I know everybody's struggling with the financial stuff and you might be a little bit worried. Don't donate if you can't donate, and if you can, thank you very much. That's how I keep going. Went to the grocery store yesterday, 2 grocery stores, and it was a nightmare. I mean, it was actually fairly chill in the sense that it wasn't nearly as much of a shambles as I thought it was gonna be, but it was a very stressful experience because there were so many reminders all around that we're going through something crazy, and this is now potentially a dangerous place to be, the Trader Joe's in Los Feliz, or whatever. So that was really, really weird, and I hope you guys are managing to make it through. Don't look at social media. Don't look at the internet. Don't look at the news. That's my advice. See you later. Have a good time. Bye.